Welcome to another episode of Stack of Stats. Today is all about the NFL draft. We are in February, so any chance I have to talk football, I am going to grab it. And I have with me an expert in trying to figure out which team will land which players. Connor Rogers, he is an NFL draft analyst for Bleacher Report. Connor, how far deep into the mock drafts are you right now?
I mean, I guess as deep as you could be. I can't keep up with all of them, and sometimes I purposely try not to because you could just scramble your brain completely. But there's certain, and I won't, name too many names, but there's certain people out there that have a really good pulse in certain areas. You can kind of get a read of maybe what that team is thinking, maybe even if it's not the player, but rather the position. So it's that time of year. You know this very, very well, and we're going to see some crazy odds, and we're going to see some crazy rumors and rumblings pretty much every week until the end of April.
Absolutely. And of course, I refer to you as an expert because I have been following your work for a few years now, and you certainly know your stuff. Can you tell me a little bit about what is your background with the mocks and with the NFL draft?
Yeah, so I started at Bleacher Report. Well, thank you. First off, it's always nice when someone calls you an expert. I don't know about that, but I'll gladly take it. So I started at Bleacher Report in the summer of 2014. I was right out of college, really as like a production researcher, working with a lot of talent, studying football with a lot of different people, talking about different storylines. But my interests going all the way back to really early in college when I was just writing and blogging and do a lot of different, the early phase of podcasting was always draft centric. So I think, unfortunately for me, I met some right people along the way that really mentored me in scouting directly, in the NFL side of things, and then people in the media side of things where, at the time, I think in 2014, the basic draft coverage was essentially what you saw on NFL Network. A lot of Mike Mayock, Daniel Jeremiah was starting to take off, but really Todd McShay and Mel Kiper. And I think what's crazy is now we're sitting here having this conversation in the being 2021. Every outlet has a draft conversation, and that's because the interest is that high in it. And fortunately, I was able to carve out, a role in doing that full time for Bleacher Report. A lot of travel at college football games, obviously things like the Senior Bowl, the Combine, even Super Bowl Radio Row Week, and even off-season stuff along the lines of that. So it's an interesting role. While I cover the draft, I cover football, whether it's trying to get inside info, whether it's evaluating prospects, whether it's just like we're doing right now, talking about the game, talking about gambling, talking about a lot of different things like that. So it's been a lot of fun, and I'm definitely really grateful for it and try to get a little better each year.
So looking at the dynamics, last year offered
No
a
worries.
bit of balance, but the stars of the draft was the wide receiver group. You had 6 wide receivers picked in the first round, 6 cornerbacks, 6 tackles. Looking at the wide receivers from last year, you had Ruggs, Judy, CeeDee Lamb, Jalen Rager, Justin Jefferson, Brandon Ayuk. Do you think these 6 players filled their reputations as first round draft picks?
I think they did, right? Now, when you look at it, of course, you're going to have, highs and lows. I think when you look at, obviously the top guys, and a lot of people had it as CeeDee Lamb or Jerry Judy. Ironically, Henry Ruggs is the first guy off the board who by no means had a bad rookie season. I think that you would like, his team to take more shots vertically, maybe look to get him involved with manufactured touches a little bit more. But there's no one out here calling him a bust or anything like that. So I think when you look at it, you wanted speed. Now you got to incorporate some ways to get your speed guy involved a little bit more. So I'm sure there's still questions there. But when you look at CeeDee Lamb and Jerry Judy, I think their storylines were the quarterback play, right? If we had a full season of CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott together, we possibly are sitting here having the conversation that CeeDee Lamb and Justin Jefferson had the best rookie wide receiver seasons. But there's no doubt that Justin Jefferson was phenomenal. He took the volume that he earned and he really ran with it. And I think that when you look at, unfortunately for the Eagles, they're probably sitting there, kicking themselves a little bit. I know it's early, but it seems like Justin Jefferson was a no-brainer in their slot. We'll see what Jalen Rager can do over time. I think that, once again, you're talking about a team that had a lot of volatility at the quarterback position. So, you've seen it. The storyline's the same for a lot of these guys. They're not walking into situations where, there's a set player at quarterback that's been there for 10 years that they can, just build a rapport with right away. Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson obviously found that. I think, Brandon Ayuk had some really big flashes, but it's obvious that if those teams went to a Tampa where they're obviously already set at wide receiver, they might come in and flourish right away. So each guy had a little bit of a different season, but I think there's something to be excited about with each of them heading into year two, but some more than others. I think CeeDee Lamb is going to explode this year with Dak Prescott. I think we're waiting to see what Denver does with at quarterback to see what they can do for Jerry Jeudy. And year two of Carr and Ruggs together, building a deep rapport, right? Taking those vertical shots takes a little longer than everything else. So I think there's a lot to be excited about.
I definitely agree. And you did mention Justin Jefferson. And of course, he was the rookie of the year. He led all rookies and ranked fourth in the league with 1,400 receiving yards, a total that surpassed Pro Football Hall of Famer Randy Moss. That was just one player who maybe didn't exceed expectations, but he definitely was a highlight of the year. Were there any players not restrained to just the wide receivers that you think either exceeded expectations? And let's kind of be honest and be real. Perhaps maybe it was a bit of a rookie bust.
Yeah, well, I think when unfortunately, when you start with rookie bust, I think there's obviously some frustrations with Rager, but I don't know how much of them are fully on him. I think though you're always going to be compared or talked about with a guy drafted after you that had more success, right? And unfortunately, that's just what happens in the NFL. It's a pretty natural conversation. So, the Eagles fans are why didn't we take Justin Jefferson? Well, Rager is going to have to, and he'll be fine. He can do that and put those things aside. But that's always going to be expectations are always going to be tough for him in that area. I think when you look at Cam Akers, I don't know if it's his fault, but I think that it took a while for him to really get going. And maybe that's just the way the Rams had planned that. It felt like the end of the season he had owned that. But yeah, I personally, for me, I thought Cam Akers was ready to come in and be their top running back by week 5, week 6, and it just never really seemed to get going that way. I know he was banged up as well. I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire is another guy that he's the first running back off the board, and with some of the injuries he faced that in that offense that he was in, I think it was a little bit disappointing when you look at what Jonathan Taylor did, you look at what J.K. Dobbins did. So when you look at it like that, James Robinson's a guy that wasn't even drafted and he was really the workhorse back in Jacksonville and had a phenomenal season. So some of those are kind of the guys that come in, exceed expectations and really outperform maybe where they were drafted or what their role on the team was expected to be. I think Chase Claypool kind of falls into that, just sneaks into the top 50 and had some monster games for the Steelers. And
Absolutely.
The Steelers just find a guy like that every year, every other year or so. So, overall, there's always those guys on day 2 of the draft at the skill spots that come in and produce like players that probably should have been taken in the top 40, top 30 picks.
Yeah, absolutely. James Robinson, Claypool, those are 2 players that you could take blindly props plays and always more than often than not cash. Akers was one player that you would want to take, and you were always, if that was always a bust on the player prop situation.
You'd be let down,
You'd
yeah.
be let down, but then you'd go right back to him the next week, kind of hoping for the best because we saw what you saw, and it was he should have been utilized more, and they figured it out maybe a little bit too late. But that definitely falls under coaching more so than it does on the player. But then you look at what is happening now. You have Carson Wentz over to the Colts. You have Big Ben who's staying another year. Deshaun Watson, who knows what is happening with that situation. And then even just today, an hour ago, within the last hour, he tweeted, "Loyalty is everything. Don't ever forget it." What does that mean? Are you saying loyal to the Texans? What does that mean?
Maybe a Russell Wilson hint there somewhere. I don't know. It's
exactly. And then Russell Wilson, and then is he going to have the potential for leaving? And really, there's just like a lot of teams on the market right now for a quarterback situation. You've got the Bears, the Falcons, the Jags, the Jets, the Panthers, the Patriots, Washington. I mean, honestly, which team isn't locked into a quarterback right now? But what are some of the predictions for the quarterback situations that you have right now?
Well, I think we know the top of the draft, right? It's not a prediction. Everybody feels pretty confident that Trevor Lawrence and Jacksonville are a match, and that pick's not going anywhere, and that the changing of who is taken at that pick isn't going anywhere. So let's get the boring one out of the way, right? I think the draft starts at number 2 with the Jets, and my gut feeling is that they will ultimately move on from Sam Darnold. And I think the teams you're looking to be in those trade conversations would be the Washington football team, would maybe be the Saints, maybe be the Bears, teams along those lines. So I think the Jets ultimately move on from Sam Darnold. And I think we would be having this conversation about Deshaun Watson and Russell Wilson for the Jets, but all indications are at this very moment, neither of those teams are interested in talking about trading either of those guys. And if you're the Jets and a lot of other teams picking after them, you have to make plans without assuming you could be in the sweepstakes for those guys. So I think the Jets are, as we have this conversation, a lot can change really quickly. But you
Mm-hmm.
have to think the Jets are looking at quarterbacks at number 2. It should be Zach Wilson, Justin Fields, or Trey Lance. And
We'll
and
go
I
ahead
think
and we'll jump onto that in just a second. You're getting a little bit ahead of the situation because I do want to talk about Trevor Lawrence. You said that is the easy one that has it locked up, and yes, it's probably true. And I do think this year is going to be the year of the quarterbacks, but I do want to go through the quarterbacks individually, starting with Trevor Lawrence because he is a minus 5,000
not
favorite
fun.
in the betting odds to be the first overall pick. And you are saying that yes, it is like it's an absolute lock. But I mean, is it? Is there a scenario that we could find where he's actually not? If there's like somebody pulls a double whammy and just like surprises the world, because there are a few questions. I don't know if I'm on a lone island here, but I kind of question Trevor Lawrence as like an auto lock on number one. They have been saying it for years. Yes, I thought that he was going to win the Heisman before all of this just because of what he had done off the field. But last year against Ohio State, he had 54% completion. He needed to use his legs. He rushed for 107 yards. This year against Virginia Tech, Clemson won 45-10, but Lawrence threw 54% completion, 1 interception. And then, of course, he was absolutely stomped against Ohio State, a player who can use his legs, but he had only minus 8 yards. So I do kind of want to play devil's advocate for a little bit here. And are we absolutely sure that Lawrence is it, that he is that generational talent that people keep claiming?
Yeah, so generational can be, a bit of a stretch. I like to say he's the best quarterback prospect we've had since Andrew Luck, to keep it kind of simple. Because if you're saying generational, you're saying, oh, he's way better than Luck. Oh, was he better than Manning when he was coming out? Things
Mm-hmm.
that were topics when you and I might not even have been born, right? So
Right.
I think it's hard to get into that conversation. Now, if you ask a simple question, are we sure he's the number 1 pick? I would be more surprised by this if he wasn't the number 1 pick than when the Browns pivoted to Baker Mayfield. At least there was rumblings around the Browns looking at doing all their homework on Baker Mayfield, really liking Baker Mayfield. I remember that year, even the week of the draft, talking to people that were close to the Baker Mayfield camp, there was hey, we feel pretty good about potentially going number 1 overall. I don't get that feeling here, right? Like I look at it
Right.
and go like, man, if Jacksonville just sits at number 1 and takes someone else, it would be one of the biggest shocks we've seen in NFL history. So,
Right.
and I think what you have to tie into this, because a lot of people think, oh, Urban Meyer, maybe Justin Fields or things along the lines of that. I think ownership in Jacksonville has had their eyes on Trevor Lawrence going back to this summer. And
Right.
then when you look at how things were handled this year, I mean, you had Mike Glennon starting real games for them. It's all very, very obvious. So,
They were, yeah.
even with the odds there, and you want to get, you throw a prayer bet. I don't think it's happening. I think we'll be as simple as that. I think that does he now? You bring up great points and great numbers. Is he a perfect player? Absolutely not. I think that he's a phenomenal player. He has a big arm. He's a great leader. He's obviously a really big bodied guy that's taken some big hits and gotten
Mm-hmm.
back up. He runs very well. He scrambles very well with his eyes downfield to make throws. Now, is he late sometimes on throws? Sure. Is he, not perfect under pressure when his line really underperformed? Absolutely. Most guys are like that. But you could find that with a lot of number 1 picks, each year. I remember when even Jared Goff was, kind of became a slam dunk number 1 pick at that time. You could find games where he really, really struggled. So I think the NFL pretty much universally views Trevor Lawrence as the guy.
Right. And I agree. And all of that is stuff that can be developed. He can be coached through that situation and become a better player coming into it, of course. But he did also have labrum surgery on his left shoulder. So he is expected to be ready for training camp after a 5-6 month recovery. But what do you know about his injury and why has that not affected his draft stock?
Well, it's on the non-throwing shoulder, which is always a good start when you want to talk about labrum injuries. And I think when you look at it overall, there all indications are that he will make a full recovery from this, and it's just not going to affect, quite frankly, how he throws the ball or how he
Right.
plays. Now, this is something you bring up a great topic. This is something that personally I find very interesting and might become a conversation a month from now with this draft class is injuries with the top quarterbacks, right? You
Mm-hmm.
have a guy like Zach Wilson that's projected to go 2nd overall.
Right.
Well, what are teams going to think when they go through the medical? Somebody that has had a significant shoulder surgery in the past. And sure, he's listed 6'3, 210. He's a little smaller than that. So, Justin Fields has taken some big shots that we've seen
Mm-hmm.
in national games where he's going to have to learn to protect his body a little more. You love that about his game. Same with Trey Lance. You love that about their game, that Zach Wilson's the same thing. Those 3 guys even Trevor Lawrence, they love to initiate contact in the second level of the field. It can hurt you in the NFL, as
Yeah,
we've seen with
absolutely.
a lot of quarterbacks. You need to learn to protect yourself. So the all indications are it's no worry with Trevor Lawrence, but I think it opens up a really interesting conversation that it's a talking point for all the top guys.
Right. And I always consider that there's a difference between talent and are you going to be healthy with that talent in the long
Of
term.
course.
So that's always going to be the conversation. But that does move us over to Zach Wilson. You were just mentioning him. He has jumped to the minus 175 favorite. He was plus 120, and now he's minus 175 to be the second overall pick. Early projections, like you said, have him going over the Jets. But I want to pick your brain on this one because here's how I have felt. How good is he really? And call me again, I'm the devil's advocate, but like college football, that is my thing. And their schedule they were against teams that were ranked bottom third for total defense. They faced Western Kentucky, who's in the top 50, but bottom 10 in offense. So it's really hard to have a winning season if you're so lopsided with your total game. And so the same could be said about San Diego State. Wilson, he was held to 7.5 yards per pass versus Coastal Carolina, one of my favorite teams. He had one interception, but then he faced UCF, who was missing almost every single key player from opt outs. So then again, I ask, how much do we really learn about Zach Wilson this season? And just tell me about him.
Yeah, no, it's a great point, and it's going to be the same conversation is happening with Trey Lance, right? When you watch his
Mm-hmm.
2019 film at the FCS level, right? I mean,
Yep.
you're looking at schools that you're like, this guy doesn't belong. He's so much better than everyone else in the field. So you're projecting. That's what you're doing, and what you see, you get excited about projecting. Now, there's risk to that. There's immense risk to that. I watched a lot of Trey Lance over the summer. I watched the showcase game this year. And then I've really spent this week diving back into 2019 again because it's like, okay, let's revisit this and just, confirm everything we think. I'm betting on the traits of Zach Wilson and Trey Lance and just keeping the conversation around Wilson. Everything he does translates to the next level because, right, and I missed on him. We had this conversation about Pat Mahomes where, you could see him bullying some really bad defenses, but the things he does should translate to the next level. The ability to throw to any level of the field with great ball placement while on the run, right? And
Right.
with Wilson, what you like is, and the reason he's talked about as the number 2 pick is because the Jets are going to run the same offense the 49ers do, Packers, Kyle Shanahan offense, the things that Wilson, and the same goes for Trey Lance, and the same even goes a little bit for Justin Fields. The things they do fit so well with that, where you're throwing on the move, you're getting the guy out of the pocket, you're cutting the field in half. I think with Wilson, what you like and what can sell you as the number 2 overall pick is, I think he has the best ball placement of anyone in the class. It's the
Mm-hmm.
incompletions that are really jaw dropping at times that either should have been caught or, let's be real. BYU, they're not exactly Clemson when it comes to skill town players. They have some good
Right.
ones, but they don't have exactly the same kind of recruiting prowess. So I think with Wilson, as an evaluator, you're right. There's risk here where these guys can be huge misses, but you just have to project what you can see. And I think with that is you love how twitchy and how fluid his mechanics are, how the ball gets out at an alarming rate, and really that he can hit any spot of the field with ease off platform. You're not even really he's not even coached up perfectly with the way he uses his base and do his throws. I think it'll get there, but he's a guy that's almost a backyard style quarterback right now. And it's going to take some work, but you're right that is there risk in this selection? And some people are saying, how could you take him over Justin Fields? I think it comes down to what you want to do on offense, but I think it's a difficult
Mm-hmm.
decision for anybody making that spot. And that's why you said the odds. They were even closer before, but those are still really, really close odds that can flip at any waking moment.
Absolutely. So, what do you think then is the likelihood that he does go number 2?
I think it's pretty high. I think the big domino we're waiting on and not having an NFL combine this year really, really hurts, especially
Mm-hmm.
teams, but it also hurts people like me that get this info from
From
teams.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, that you don't know what his medicals look like. If you're taking Zach Wilson, number 2 overall, you are betting on him to be the face of your franchise for the next 15 years. And now to do that, can you stay healthy or are you durable enough to do that when you're taking hits from NFL players, not from Western Kentucky and Coastal Carolina, who has some NFL defensive players,
Yes. Yes.
but absolutely, it's still a difference. So, and I have the same questions for Trey Lance, Justin, from the FCS. So those
Mm-hmm.
are the things that you really need to solve. But right now, based on film, based on chatter, the belief in Wilson is sky high, where I think for most teams, he will be the number 2 quarterback on their board.
That is why I have you on here because you know what? I will be the first to admit Justin Herbert, he was definitely one player that I wasn't spectacularly in love with
Same with
at
me.
college. And then he comes into the NFL and wow, like I was impressed. So like I can admit when I've gotten it wrong. And definitely he was one of the players that I did. So maybe Zach Wilson, I've definitely been not an advocate for him all season. But if he ends up doing well, I can definitely see him with the Jets. And with that defense, maybe they could end up being a beast of a team after all. But then looking over at Justin Fields, he is the betting favorite at plus 200. His odds have not changed to go third pick overall with projections over to the Eagles, maybe. So this is an interesting for a few reasons. I feel like Jalen Hurts, one, he has solidified his place. I was kind of loving what he was doing, the dynamic that he was bringing to that team. And then you've got to think about his stock. If it was hurt a little bit after his performance against Northwestern, 44% completion, 2 interceptions, 6.1 yards per pass. What happened? I know they have a terrible, terrible offensive line, but then it just got completely outmatched against Alabama, 5.9 yards per pass, 51% completion. Does number 3 still even make sense for him?
Yes, it does, because you have to think that Miami will at least take calls, and even if Miami doesn't move, they're going to take a wide receiver or a tackle. They're not going to take a quarterback to come in and compete with Tua. So, yes. Now, what I would look at Fields as a better, I don't. There's so much volatility between the 2 through 4 spot, right? Which we're assuming is Wilson, Fields, and Lance. Now, the Mac Jones talk picked up this week. I'm not buying it, but it picked up this week. I would look at the over under. I think I'm seeing a lot of mock drafts that are projecting Fields in the after the 10th pick range. There was even one from NFL today that had him at 24. I think that the over under odds with Fields are going to be a little bit fluky, where you might be able to steal some money because he's a top 8 lock to me. And if
Mm-hmm.
anything is set over that, it's ridiculous. So and the Northwestern game is one that scares you. I think you're seeing some of his flaws illuminated, whether it's just trying to make the hero play, holding onto the ball for a long time, trying to make the hero play, and then under pressure. It's been talked about a lot this week how many option routes they run. So he's naturally going to hold the ball out or go through his progressions a little slower than every other quarterback. So
Right.
those have been overblown a little bit. I think when teams, now they don't have private workouts, but when they really dig into what Justin Fields can do physically as a runner, as a power thrower, especially down the field, somebody will be sold on him, I think, as a top 5 pick, no matter how much chatter you hear of him escaping the top 8 to 10. That's insane. And I'm with you that I think we're going to see things get real. If Deshaun Watson and Russell Wilson aren't moved before the draft, you're going to have a lot more teams looking to move up for one of the draftable quarterbacks, which changes everything, whether it's the Eagles from 6, whether it's Carolina from 8, Washington from 19, the Patriots from 15, the Broncos are in that
Mm-hmm.
mix as well. So my advice to everyone is bet the quarterbacks up. I think Trey Lance, Justin Fields, Zach Wilson, Trevor Lawrence all go in the top 8.
What do you think is keeping Justin Fields from being projected at number 2?
It's a great question, and it's something that I would like to tap into a little more. I think once again, it might just be that holding on to the ball and sitting, not always sitting in the pocket, because I think he does a good job getting out of it, but just getting the ball out. And I think it's
Right.
something where you might want to sit and have a conversation. What were you asked to do in your offense? Because that might answer some of your questions. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that because I think Justin Fields has really good ball placement too at all 3 levels, and he has great arm strength, and I think he has a body that should hold up a little better than a guy like Zach Wilson. I think when you look at
Right.
Justin Fields, I see a lot of Dak Prescott, to be honest with you. So it's an
Interesting.
interesting conversation. But I think with Wilson, you're just looking at elite level ball placement, and everything in his throwing motion is a little twitchier and quicker, where you feel better about the timing of your offense. Once again, it goes back to that Shanahan offense, that Shanahan pass game, where you feel a little bit more comfortable about the timing of your offense with Wilson as a thrower than Fields. That's
Right.
the narrative that I'm finding that a lot of people are selling.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And then we have talked about a little bit of Trey Lance, and he definitely is the outlier in all of this. Hails from North Dakota State, an FCS team. Drafts have him projected at number 4 overall with the Falcons. I have seen him lower than that also, but because of COVID, we did only see him play just one game in October, and it wasn't his best. He had 50% completion, 1 interception, 3 sacks, 5.9 yards per pass, but he did rush for 150 yards. But that at all doesn't tell the story of his career stats, but you are going off of old data. So what is the likelihood that he remains in the top 5?
Top five is going to be interesting. I think you're looking more at top 8 for Trey Lance. Now, for me, he's a top 5 player. I have him as the 5th overall player. I've made the argument for anyone that'll listen to it that this guy had a normal full regular season, not a showcase game. He would have had a chance. It's a long shot. It probably wouldn't have happened, but he would have had the opportunity to make a run at the number 1 pick. That's how physically talented he is. Now, what that should open your eyes to is he would have had a realistic chance to be the number 2 pick rather than the number 1 pick, because I think the accuracy is very good. I think he's the best runner of the 4. And I'm not talking about, getting outside the pocket and throwing down the field like Wilson does, like Fields does. I'm talking about a player that the run game is designed around him, where he's breaking tackles, where he's a power runner at the goal line, where he's somebody that can get outside and give you a first down when you need one. So, and he looks to break tackles, and he does it at an alarming rate. So I think with Lance, the accuracy, the ability as a runner, this is just my personal take. I think after Trevor Lawrence, and maybe even the same as Lawrence, I think he will be the best in interviews. I think teams will like him the best as a leader, as how much he just loves football. Finally, that he's dedicating his training all to being a quarterback. I mean, let's not forget that marvelous season he had, 28 touchdowns, no picks. It's a redshirt freshman. So, and it's a dart throw. NFL teams are saying, can I bet my franchise on a guy that played one dominant year of FCS ball? Some teams are ready to do that. Other teams will be more skeptical. But the point is, Trey Lance is so loaded with talent that he's worth taking the swing on in those top 8 picks.
Absolutely. I agree with all of that sentiment. But it is the Falcons, and Matt Ryan is on a 5-year, $150 million contract. So I can see a scenario where the Falcons don't go with a quarterback, even though they should, and trade the pick, even though they should. So if it's not Lance and if it's not a quarterback for the Falcons, what are you thinking about trading the pick where, or what option are they going to next?
I think that's the ideal spot for a team like Carolina or Denver to move up, right? I think when you look at it, because the jump's not astronomical for the Falcons, right? Of course, we're going to sit here and say Patriots need a quarterback of the future. Washington football teams needs a quarterback of the future. The Bears, you can go on and on. The Bears. But a lot of people make this mistake. A lot of teams don't want to jump back that far. If you're the Falcons, you're looking at that. Now let's talk about the scenario you brought up. You keep Matt Ryan. You try to get better around him as his career winds down these next couple of years. Well, if you go to 8, right? Let's say there was already 4 quarterbacks taken. So that means only 3 other position groups went off the board. You might have a shot at Jamar Chase. You might have a shot at Penei Sewell. You might have a shot at Micah Parsons or Caleb. I mean, the door is wide open for what you could do with your football team to get a blue chip talent at 8 or 9 or something along those lines.
But they need a quarterback.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
Someone who's lost a lot of money on the Falcons over the years, they need a quarterback. But I'm going to move over to Mac Jones, because enough of that. I will admit, like you said, there's a little bit of hype kind of starting to build up around him. But I will admit, it surprises me to see him projected so low. And I've seen him going 28th to the Saints. I'll also admit that I can see a world where he doesn't even go first round at all. He had 4,500 yards, 41 touchdowns, 77% completion. Of course, a national title. But does he improve? I did see that he potentially improved his stock after the Senior Bowl appearance. Did that help him any?
I think it did. I think teams like being around players, right? And the Senior Bowl was the only opportunity really that teams got to send a handful of guys to go check out players. Now, when you look at Mac Jones, I'm with you that for the longest time, I thought he was going to be a fringe round 1 guy. Like you said, it was the Saints or bust, in my opinion. And then you're looking at the second round. I don't know if I feel that way anymore. I think there's been too much buzz. I think there's too much need at quarterback now. Could something unprecedented happen where, the tones change of these teams? Watson and Russell Wilson are traded in the next month, and then the quarterback landing spot, Jameis Winston's going to sign somewhere. The quarterback landing spot door closes after Sam Darnold gets traded. Jimmy Garoppolo might be on the move. There's so many variables, right?
Yeah.
But when you look at it, just the meat and potatoes of evaluating this, there are so many quarterback needy teams. Somebody's going to sell themselves and say, we have the offensive line in place, the infrastructure in place for Mac Jones to succeed as a pocket passing thrower. I do think he goes in the first round.
I've also read that it is a bit of a battle between Trey Lance and Mac Jones. How do you think
I don't
that the two compare?
Well,
I know they're
not at
totally separate
all.
quarterbacks, but as
Yes.
far as like
So
draft position, there's a battle.
no,
Like,
it's a great question. I think if you're, let's talk about it like this, right? If now
mm,
I don't agree with this, but this is how teams will look at it. Say you
okay,
are the Saints.
okay.
You have a top three offensive line in football.
Hmm.
You have a number one wide receiver that needs to get back on track, but we're
Yeah,
going to call him a number one wide receiver because that's what he is.
that's what he
You
is.
have a top three running back that's a tremendous pass catcher, and you have a top five offensive coach in football. That might actually be like disrespectful to call Sean Payton that. He's that good. So you're sitting there and going, well, Mac Jones played for Alabama. He's
Hmm.
going to come in here and be the guy from day one.
Right.
And we know he's accurate. He
Hmm.
stands in the pocket. He has no problem with timing. He has no problem with a lot of the routes the concepts we run. But for me, I like the upside of Trey Lance. But this is how they're selling themselves. They're saying, well, maybe Trey Lance needs a year on the bench,
Right.
or maybe Trey Lance's best asset at the moment is more of his running ability rather than being a drop back passer, drop back timing
I can
passer.
see that.
So that's where you're getting that from. I look at it and go like, let's use Carolina for example, right? Once again, I don't agree with this at all. But if there's rumblings that Carolina would take Mac Jones at 8, well,
Hmm.
who's calling the plays? Joe Brady. Who did Joe Brady call plays for before Teddy Bridgewater for 1 year? Joe Burrow.
Hmm.
Now, I don't think Mac Jones is on the same planet as Joe Burrow. But what you love about both of those guys is the timing and ball placement and accuracy from the pocket is tremendous. It's absolutely tremendous. So those are the things people are trying to connect the dots of.
Right.
When it's all said and done, I believe you have to take the different level of talent.
I mean, and also just the level of confidence that you saw in him. Like, he did throw an interception. It didn't phase him. Like, granted, it
No,
was on, he had all the talent around him, and it was the coaching, and it was Alabama. So I get it. You're so dominant. But I mean, there's also just, I think there's just like a different aura to him almost, where it's like nothing can break him from a mental strength standpoint. And that's what I like about Mac Jones. And so I would personally would like to see him definitely higher up on the draft board, but I can understand that maybe, yeah, was it him? Was it the talent? So we'll definitely find out with that. But does he just not look like Tom Brady entering the draft, like body type? And like, I just feel like 15 years from now, we're going to be counting his rings.
the biggest shoulder pads in college football, and just like it doesn't look pretty when he's moving,
Yeah,
but the ball gets out and the arm is there. And I mean, you heard what Devontae Smith apparently told the team: the guys that catch the ball from him love him.
absolutely. And so that brings into like, where does Kyle Trask come into all of this? Initially, it was thought that it was the Colts at 21, but of course, Carson Wentz went over, maybe 54. But what Kyle Trask, he was an absolute stud until he kind of like floundered there a little bit in towards the end. But what are we thinking for Kyle Trask?
Now, I think you're looking at round two for Kyle Trask. I think what you
Interesting.
like is, I mean, you talk about a player that was like a no star, essentially no
Hmm.
expectations, recruit at Florida that earned the starting job eventually after a
Right.
long college career. So I think what you like about him, I think his feel in the pocket is really good. I think that he showed he's willing to give his playmakers a chance. Kyle Pitts, Kadarius Toney. And I think that when things broke down, I actually thought he knew how to navigate the pocket really well. Is he going to
Hmm.
get outside and run 40 yards and run a 4 or 5 40? No, that's not who he is. But is he somebody that knows how to work his way around in and out of the pocket to make plays because of his feel? Yes, and his touch throwing is there, absolutely. Now, does he have a power arm? Not at all. So physically limited is what you're going to hear with Kyle Trask. And those guys just don't really go in round one anymore. But do you like that guy as someone that comes in and is your backup and eventually is a fringe starter competing for a job down the road in the right situation? Absolutely. So we've seen this every year. These kind of guys usually find their way somewhere on day two on a team that might have a more stable quarterback situation or might have bodies that are ready to get reps as the 1 and 2, where he comes in and there's not expectations. But you look at Jalen Hurts last year. Everybody saw that pick after Carson Wentz was there and said very capable backup. Well, he got his chance,
Good.
and
Mhm.
hopefully he gets more of a chance. I think we'll see a similar situation with Trask, where a team that you don't think of, but fears quarterback injury will take him.
Steelers 55.
That's what we're talking about, right? You're looking
Saints
at those
60.
kind of landing spots. Exactly.
Yep. So I'm going to read you some betting options that I'd like you to give me your best guess on. Who will be, and we've already touched up on these, but just to kind of go through the options one by one, is who will be the second quarterback selected? Give me your best guess.
I think Zach Wilson. If I'm having this, we're having this conversation today, I would say
Mhm.
Zach Wilson right now.
Zach Wilson. Who will be the third quarterback selected?
I'll go with Justin Fields, but I wouldn't put money on this one yet. I
Okay.
think it's going to be very interesting between him and Trey Lance, and I think it's going to be interesting with Wilson's medicals if that hurts him at all.
And that the odds kind of indicate as such. Fields and Trey Lance are the co-favorites at plus 125. And then you've got Zach Wilson at plus 150 as the third, followed by Mac Jones, Kyle Trask, and of course Trevor Lawrence down at the bottom, long shot odds. But who will be the second pick? Not the second quarterback, the second pick overall.
I'll still say Zach Wilson. I think the Jets are going to move on from Sam Darnold when all is said and done.
Okay. Who will be the third pick overall?
This is going to be interesting because part of me thinks that Miami is so stuck on building around Tua that they might not get cute with this and move out of the pick. They'll take the calls, but I think they're going to look at Jamar Chase as somebody that could change their offense. So I'll say Jamar Chase right now.
Jamar Chase is plus 350. He is the fourth favorite behind Justin Fields, Penei Sewell, and Devonta Smith.
I might have to get my way over there.
That looks like an interesting option for sure. But yes, I am going to say I am a Longhorn. Hook 'em. So I have to say that I am a bit worried about my man, Sam Ehlinger. I don't even see him being mentioned. He was just named Jason Witten Collegiate Man of the Year. Definitely hook 'em horns. But in his career, he threw for over 11,000 yards, 127 total touchdowns, including 33 rushing scores. He definitely has a dual threat ability. And this year he left it all out on the field. You saw it in the way he played, his emotion, his heart, he wore it on his sleeve and he gave it all that he had. But still, tell me something positive. What is his NFL future looking like?
Well, I think when you look at it, there's roles for people like him, obviously. When you look at, what Trace McSorley was asked to do in Baltimore, a quarterback that can move a little bit, that obviously can throw, but isn't going to light the world on fire with his arm at the next level. I think when you look at Sam Ehlinger, he will be drafted. He will be drafted as probably a third stringer that maybe you put in some sub package roles because you like what he can do at the goal line as a runner or as a thrower. So, really good college career. It almost felt Tebow-esque with him at times, just the passion, how long he was there, the numbers, what he can do on and off the field. So I think when you look at Ehlinger, I project him as a day 3 pick and somebody that will be slotted as a third stringer in his introduction to the NFL. But with the amount of quarterback injuries, there's no reason we can't expect to see him on the field at some point.
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking the same. But we have been talking about the quarterbacks. I do want to touch up on some of the other player positions. Starting first, one of the most insane running backs in all of college football season last year, Jared Patterson. I live from action. So I definitely want to see my Mac men do some damage in the NFL. He put up some video game numbers. He rushed for over 1,000 yards each year. In November, he ran for 409 yards, 8 touchdowns in one game. But yes, it was against another Mac opponent, potentially one of the worst defenses in all of college football in Kent State. But how do scouts perceive talent in a conference like the MAC?
Well, when you look at Buffalo, they have 2 guys that on offense that belong in the NFL and belong to be drafted, and Jared Patterson and Antonio Nunn. Now, I think when you look at Patterson as a whole, the production is phenomenal. So you look at the traits, that's what you do. And I think the vision and burst, as soon as he gets the ball, it's evident. He knows where to go.
Right.
He knows how to find the hole, run skinny, get through it. And his speed in the MAC is going to go for a home run every time. At the NFL, I don't think it'll be the same.
Right.
And it's okay. It's not what you're expecting. So definitely a draftable player. Definitely somebody that can split a workload, right? I'm curious to see if he'll be viewed as a workhorse down the line. I don't think he will. But I think if you're looking for a third down back with a change of pace kind of role, that's how Patterson's going to be viewed. And I think that, the numbers don't lie. I think when you look at how good he was, he obviously has NFL ability at the next level. And the same could be said for Nunn. The team didn't throw the ball a lot. What Nunn did with his targets there was phenomenal. He's one of my favorite sleepers in this draft. So I think both will be drafted, and I think both will actually be pretty productive throughout their NFL careers, considering where they're coming from and what the expectations originally were.
Where do you see him being projected? Maybe in the early second, late one, Jared Patterson?
Oh, I think he goes
further
on
down the board.
Yeah, I think you're looking at probably round 5 for Patterson. But look at the running backs that are taken there.
Yeah, no, you're right. And then tell me that there is not an offensive tackle who is not a lock to go to the Bengals at number 5. Oregon's Penei Sewell is the minus 500 favorite to be drafted first of the offensive tackle position. Is there another player that could surprise and go ahead of him instead?
Yeah, I think Rashawn Slater is absolutely in play. I was a little surprised when I initially saw these odds for first offensive tackle off the board. I think Penei Sewell is the best one. Now, I think there's chatter in the league of who teams like best. I think Slater is a guy from a technical standpoint is as clean as they come, right? It kind of reminds me of Tristan Wirfs coming out of Iowa, where everything is really, really good. And you can get to the second level and make a difference in your run game as well. Wirfs was tremendous on a Super Bowl winning team. It doesn't get talked about enough. So Penei Sewell, great player, absolutely the favorite and well earning of the favorite, but do not rule out Rashawn Slater in that spot.
And there's only two offensive tackles up on the board. Who will be drafted first? Penei Sewell minus 500, and then Rashawn Slater is plus 300. So I would definitely consider probably even myself taking that. Because
Yeah, throw a little money on it. Why not?
once rumblings start changing, those odds are going to shift. But another surprise is saying that mocks having, for me, is seeing that mocks have LSU's Jamar Chase before Alabama's Heisman winner Devontae Smith. Where do you have each wide receiver going?
I think Chase will be the first one off the board. I actually think we could see Jalen Waddle as the second wide receiver off the board, and then Devontae Smith as the third wide receiver off the board.
I'm glad that you're mentioning Waddle because I think if it wasn't for injuries, then we could have seen Jalen Waddle as the first wide receiver selected,
Yes.
and we could have seen him as the Heisman. God, this guy is such an absolute stud, a beast. But am I crazy to think that he could potentially go first ahead of either of these wide receivers?
No, you're not. And I saw it at plus 700 where I'm located, and I threw a little bit on it because I did this last year at Bleacher Report on the Lefko show. I said, put a little money on Henry Ruggs plus 700 right now because you can never bet against speed when the odds are that good. And I think Waddle's a guy that is probably going to run in the 4.2s. I mean, we might be looking at like a 4.29 kind of pro day, and teams might sit there and go, we can't get that speed anywhere else. So at those odds, throw a little bit on Jalen Waddle.
Where do you right now see Waddle landing potentially?
Oh, I mean, I wouldn't rule it out with Miami at 3. It's tricky, right? You look at it. We don't really think the Falcons are a team for wide receiver. So it's going to come down to obviously what him and Chase do. And then obviously free agency is going to have a huge impact because Allen Robinson, Kenny Galladay, Chris Godwin, one of those guys could hit the market, and then teams will, that need wide receiver sign one and don't anymore. But I wouldn't rule out the Bengals maybe looking for a deep threat. I wouldn't look at rule out a team like Detroit. The Giants at 11 is perfect. It almost feels like his floor. And then the Niners are a team that Kyle Shanahan will always look to take receivers. I don't think that happens at 12, but still something to keep an eye on. And I wouldn't even rule out the Chargers at 13 with Herbert because we know how much, that would be dynamite.
That would be. I'm excited for him. I want to see him healthy, and I want to see him just like absolutely destroying the NFL, which I think is definitely possible. Rookie of the year is possible if he can go in healthy. But last year there were 0 tight ends drafted in the first round. In 2019, both TJ Hawkinson and Noah Fant went first. This year, Kyle Pitts is looking like he's likely to be drafted in the first round. Where do you see him being a good fit?
I think it goes back to the conversation we just had. You're going to look at the Giants at 11. You're going to look at the Chargers at 13. On the high ends, you're going to look at the Bengals, right? You might even look at, if he just has a freakish testing day, you might talk about the Falcons. It's crazy as that sounds. They're just going all in on weapons. So I really like him to the Giants or Chargers. Maybe a team, it's ridiculous to say overdrafted in the top 10, but tight ends in the top 10 is not a common theme because you usually don't get the kind of production you expect out of a top 10 pick. Which is why I think he's just a better fit in those other 2 locations.
That makes sense. And I'm going to throw out some options, and I want you to give me your best guess. Who will be selected first, Jamar Chase or Devonta Smith?
I'm going to say Jamar Chase.
He is the favorite, minus 150 over Smith, who is plus 110. Who will be selected first, Kyle Pitts or Jalen Waddle?
Wow, that's tricky. I'm going to say Waddle. And that might surprise people right now. I know Pitts is the talk of town. I'm still going to go with Waddle. I think by the end of this process, he'll be viewed as the closest thing to Tyreek Hill that we've seen in a while.
Interesting. And he is the underdog in this scenario. He is plus 170 to be grabbed over Kyle Pitts, who is minus 250 favorite. So I'm probably going to be tagging on that too. So is there any value at taking Najee Harris to be selected under 32 and a half at plus 110?
Not really. I think that sure, Najee can go in the first round. It's not a good value bet. Even last year, we were a little surprised when the Chiefs took Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the first round. It was, the conversation was, will running back go in the first round? And one snuck in at 32. But I think, Is Najee a first round caliber player? Yes. With what's gone on with the position over the years, I think it's more likely to see him go in the top 40 instead.
Okay. And if there's one bet that you are making right now from some of the options that we have discussed, what is it?
Wow, that is. You know what?
I liked
I
your
think
Waddle prediction going first.
Yeah, I think the one I would have fun with, because the odds are so ridiculous, plus 700 or whatever it was, would be Waddle. I think that's the one that excites me. I think Slater is an interesting one, right? I think that's one where the odds are in your favor. I think it was plus 300. So
Mm-hmm.
I always look for the value in the draft, because I think when it's this early, there's a
Right,
big
yeah.
disconnect of what's actually going on in the league.
Absolutely. Well, that does it, Connor. I really do appreciate you hopping on, providing so much insight into the draft. And I know that you have a Patreon, so something related to Badlands. So can you explain what it is and what you're doing over with that?
Yeah, so it's my side project. It's everything related to the New York Jets offseason, regular season, NFL draft. So we do a lot of different tiers over there that are launching, and include a draft guide, includes podcasts, includes written content. It's basically a small subscription service for all
Mm-hmm.
things New York Jets related. And then if you love the draft talk for Bleacher Report, I'm going to be doing an 8-week lead up show with Adam Lefko on the NFL draft once a week in the Bleacher Report app on YouTube. And we'll be covering the actual NFL draft all 3 days live on Bleacher Report as well this year.
I was watching that live last year, so I'll be looking forward to doing that again. But we've got to do this again closer to the draft and as things start to become more clear and more betting odds get put up on the board, because it's still early, so I'm sure that more are going to be added. But I do have one last question for you. This far out, give me your best hot take.
Best hot take. Wow. Let's pull up the draft rankings and find something that I just completely disagree with compared to everyone. This is always tricky. I think Rashad Bateman is a top 20 player, and I don't see him like in the top anywhere. Like some top 50s don't have him.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what I'm missing. I think he's Keenan Allen. I know that's a little lofty and maybe some hyperbole there because comps get out of control. Is that a hot take to you?
I mean, considering that I do look at a lot of mocks and I have not seen his name listed anywhere in the first draft in a first round at all. So yeah, potentially that's what I'm looking for. The players that you don't expect to go up early and they do.
Yeah. So I think,
Surprises.
and even if he's not, I mean, I would be all over him as this like fantasy superstar as a later on pick.
No, well, that's good. I do like that as a hot take, but that does it for an early look at the NFL draft. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Stack of Stats.